Hi, Julie Jones from SSB Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training, here with this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear and On Point Pest Control. This week we're talking about, when did standards become old school? Well, I've got an old school Webster's definition of standard for you here. Something established by authority, custom, or general consent as a model or example. Something set up and established by authority as a rule for the measure of quantity, weight, extent, value, or quality. I know, Webster's old school. And I know from talking to my coaches and other leaders that people who have standards are labeled old school as well. You hear it all the time. Coaches, leaders, people who have high expectations get pushback. There's lots of complaining. Standards sometimes are looked at as boundaries set that are unreasonable. They're judged by people who really don't exactly know what the standards even mean or how important they are to success. Every team and individual endeavor that has found success has been governed by standards, goals, boundaries, expectations, whatever you want to call them, all the same. But standards are a part of life. You see them all the time. Go out to the road. There are white lines on the side. I think they're white on the side or yellow in the middle, whatever. There are lines on the road, and there are even lines on the road. They're either double or they are, dashes, or one side's double. And so you know whether you can pass someone or not. There are signs that say you've got to let the other guy go first. And then, of course, there are signs that tell you how fast you can go. We have standards that we have to live by in order to hold people accountable and keep people safe and keep people moving literally in one direction. That's what standards do, and boundaries and expectations. But people don't seem to want those anymore. And I'm not going to pretend like I follow the traffic rules all the time. And the truth of it is when I don't, I'm running the risk of paying a fine. And if my dad's listening to this, he's like, yeah, 1 or 2 fines. He's going, yeah, right. But the bottom line is we know if we don't follow these rules, there are consequences to them. Consequences aren't always negative. But in this case, if I speed or run a stop sign or don't let the other guy yield, time to pay up. And it's the same way when we have standards on teams and in business or in any expectation or any situation in life where we're trying to do things together or trying to move forward. Imagine if you only did what you felt like doing. You went as fast as you wanted, you drove wherever you wanted, you did whatever you wanted, and you only did the things that you wanted to do. Where would you be in life? And where would everybody else be around you? We know that that's not reality, and yet we still push back against standards and expectations. People don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be pushed. But in order to be our best, we must be pushed. The truth of it is, and we all know this, that the world works this way. In order to get this, you have to do that. Or in order to get that, you cannot do this. That is the way that it goes. I remember years ago in a situation, I loved my boss, but one of the kids went in and complained about something, and she said, why do you force them, or why do you make them bring their water bottle to practice? And why, if they don't bring it, do you punish them? Well, number one, they're given a water bottle. And if we're not going to use it, then why are we wasting the money? But the real reason was it was an expectation, because when we had a break in practice, which we had to fit into a 2-hour window because classes are all over the place, when we had a break in practice for water, if everybody is waiting in line to get a cup of water out of the big Gatorade thing, that takes a lot longer than everybody running over, grabbing their water bottle, squeezing it in their mouth, doing what they need to do, and getting back out to the field. So it wasn't about being a jerk. It was about trying to fit in more work to get better as a coach. Silly us. But these are the things that people complain about. There was a reason that they needed to bring their water bottle. It was for the betterment of the group. But they didn't want to do it. Or apparently someone didn't want to do it. Most someone's did. But you get the point. I'm sure that you have examples all over the place too. When I was thinking about this, I just read a book. It's called 20 Minutes to a Top Performer, 3 Fast and Effective Conversations to Motivate, Develop, and Engage Your Employees. Author Alan Bagel used an example of removing a tennis net from the tennis court. He wanted to have a positive game of tennis. He said, you know what, let's just take the net down and let's just hit. You know what, and then let's just ignore the lines. No lines, no in or out. We're just going to hit. Well, all of a sudden, this positive game of tennis became ridiculous. There's no way to tell who's winning. There's no way to keep score whatsoever because there's no net and there are no lines. And now it's not even fun anymore. We have barriers and standards and lines and things to make things challenging, or we won't do them. Another example, Jason Selk in the 10-minute toughness, he used a Pop-A-Shot. He was talking about goals, but it fits this same thing. He had everybody just take one shot on a Pop-A-Shot machine. And it's like, who won? Who's satisfied with that? Well, nobody wins if you only take one, because a lot of people missed and a lot of people made it. So he said, well, let's just make this more exciting. We'll turn on some music. He unplugged the Pop-A-Shot. He let everybody shoot as many times as they wanted for 60 seconds. But it's not plugged in, so there's no score. So at the end, he said, who won? And everybody said, what do you mean, who won? Who won? How can we tell who won? Because we weren't keeping score. There was nothing to tell us whether or not we got counted for the ball that went through the hoop. Again, without standards, how do we stay on track? They push us, and champions know that. We can't even reach flow. Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow, he designed, right, the state of deep immersion and enjoyment in an activity. We can't even get to that without standards, because he says that standards and expectations are a necessary part of the challenge that drives us into this optimal state. This is where we perform at our peak. We have to be challenged to get into flow. We don't get into flow when we're just doing something we can do, because when we're doing something we can do, there's no challenge to it. Flow requires challenge, standards, expectations, boundaries, whatever you want to call it. So how do we walk the line between being a jerk and having standards and trying to make everybody happy? And of course, I cringe as I say that. It's not our job to make people happy, but how do we get people to meet the standards and take them in a way that is going to help them instead of turn them off? That's really the question. And it comes down to this: communication. We have to communicate. And we're going to start by remembering what John Gordon said in You Win in the Locker Room First. He says, where there's a void in communication, negativity fills it. We tell ourselves stories. We tell ourselves horrible stories and horribly incorrect stories when no one is talking to us. My flight was delayed this weekend. The guy at the desk was saying nothing, and people were starting to get restless. The woman then starts to talk, and everybody chills out because they had information, and without information, they're making up stories about how many days they're going to get stuck in New Orleans, and it's not pretty. We have to be crystal clear with everyone at the start, all stakeholders, and we have to define our expectations. We have to define everything that we expect, because hard work to me is very different than hard work to you. Family means something different to me than it means to you. Think about kids who have a family that cheat and lie and steal from them, compared to the kids who have a family who support them. That's, of course, what we're talking about when we have a team. But there are athletes and people that you're working with that don't have that picture of family. So we have to define what these words mean. Number one, it's very important. It's hard to meet expectations if we don't know exactly what they live like. That's what I like to say. What behaviors do we need? What do they look like, sound like, feel like, live like? We assume, and you know what happens when you assume, that everybody understands what we're saying. But our communication can't stop there. It's time to throw in some good old calm theory persuasion. Thank you, Dr. Rick Perloff at Cleveland State University, for writing that great book that I read page to page. in graduate school. But I'm teaching the art of coaching communication, and I've been listening and reading from Dr. Rob Cialdini, and he has 7 different types of ways that we can persuade people. We're going to talk about 2 real quickly. Number 1, his theory of consistency is about getting people to do something small and then remain consistent to that. He uses a story where they're trying to improve safe driving. He asked people to put a really small sign in their window that said, I support safe driving, or no texting and driving. And then they went and they asked to put a big sign in their yard. And because they said yes, and the little sign connected them to this cause, and now they are people who care about safe driving because they've done something that connects them to safe driving. Now they are exponentially more likely to put the big sign in their yard. Why? Because we like to be consistent. We don't like to have dissonance. We don't like to say, you know what, I was okay with it there, but no. So how can we get our athletes to do something small that connects them to our cause, if you will, and then ask them to do something bigger? It's just like in sales. When you get someone to say yes, they're more likely to say yes to a bigger ask. The initial small action aligns their behavior with the cause, and when they're asked for further action, they're more likely to do it. We have to get them to commit to something small that we think is important, so that then their behaviors coincide with that, and we can get them to be consistent, because that makes us feel better. And we can use this with those we lead. And then another idea from Cialdini's toolbox is this: we need to get them talking. He used an example of a friend of his who was having a hard time in interviews, and then all of a sudden he's getting all these great interviews. And here is what he did. And I'm going to quote from Cialdini. It says, his friend would say, "I'm very happy that you had me come in." So he's in the interview, and now he's talking to the interviewer. "I want to answer all of your questions, but before I do that, I'm curious about something. I wonder if you could answer a question for me." So now he's getting them thinking, and he wants them to think about this. Why did you invite me here? What was it about my resume, about my qualifications, about my background that caused you to invite me? Well, they are talking about all the great things in his resume, all the great things that he's done, and now they are committed to the fact that he deserves to be in that room. It forced them to make comments about the good things about them, and those comments become commitments. Now, all of a sudden, he is an amazing candidate. He may have been just like all the other candidates before he sat down in that room and asked them to ask these questions and make these commitments to him, that they believed that he was there for a reason because he's qualified. All of a sudden, he started getting jobs. What a genius idea. Think about the ways that you could do that. If someone comes in and says, tell me why you wanted to play for this program, or why did you want to play for me, or why did you want to work in this industry, in this beautiful building, in this beautiful city, tell me why. Then they're committing to why they're doing what they're doing. It's genius, and you can use it. I'll be interested to see if you take your old school ways and add some new. These aren't really new things, but they might be new to us. I'm old school too. I was all about standards and still am. But these are some pretty good research-backed ideas that can help us get people to buy in and meet our standards, because we know that's what's best for them, not for us, for them. Let me know what you think of these. I'm excited about this, and I would love to hear your feedback. JulieJ@ssbperformance.com, or shoot me a text. My phone number is at the end of every email and every article. Until next week, think about the old school standards and how you can get people to see them as something new that's consistent with their behavior and that they can commit to, and that you have defined clearly for them. Have a great week.